From the Cold Formed Steel Buildings Association, this is Cold Formed Buildings Made Easy with your hosts, John Cosper and Lauren Toole.
Welcome. This is Cold Form Building Made Easy. Your hosts, Lauren Toole and John Cosper.
And we're picking up with part 2 of our interview with Nathan Margosian. Nathan is the founder of NatMar Construction based out of Colorado. And he's an expert on building cold form buildings. And we had so much good information in our last episode, we decided to stretch this one into 2. So sit back, relax, and enjoy.
You've got this down to a science. You know, I know you've got 2 crews running now.
Kind of, yeah. So I had 2 full-time crews last year that were all as W-2 employees, and then we were actually outpacing the amount of work we were getting. So that's why something we're doing this year is we're really trying to gear up our own, so all the work I've gotten has just been off of reputation. I haven't done any advertising, I haven't done any marketing at all. Wow. That's something I'm changing as of this week. I'm trying to get our own advertising going, our own marketing going, so we can really do the full sales process, vending process, all that kind of stuff in-house. I think that would be a great benefit to the customer, and we can go into some reasons why I think that. But right now we've actually gotten so busy that I got enough work that where I've got my full-time guys where I have them do our biggest projects, our most complex projects, and then I have another guy who has put up a few of the buildings. He's pretty good. I have one of my guys manage him just so that he's there to answer any questions, and I've got a good relationship with this individual as well, so he'll FaceTime me sometimes if he's run into something he hasn't seen before, and then I can just help him through it. And then he has enough experience too, or if it's something weird, I can just kind of be like, hey, do this and this, and he's like, oh, okay, cool, and then it's all good. And he kind of takes care of our overflow essentially. So He's done 2 buildings for me this summer, and he'll do another one for me this month.
Excellent. How long does it take you? How long does it take you to onboard somebody new and teach them to do things, not just how to do these, but do the system you put together?
It depends a lot on the person, as it would with any job, right? Some people are a lot more interested in learning and just interested in the job itself, because that's something too where every person, so I've trained personally, I don't know, over a dozen people how to build these from start to finish with 0 prior construction experience at all. Like my lead guy right now, what he did prior to working at NatMar was he was pushing carts at Lowe's, and he builds them. He might even build them better than me. He does really good job. So but yeah, he learned very quickly, and he also had like an eagerness to learn. But it just depends. I mean, a lot on average, if you're taking someone with no experience at all, like you're kind of teaching them how to use power tools kind of thing, and bringing them on, and you have someone who's pretty diligent about teaching them, I would say they can do most things by themselves within just a couple of buildings most of the time. Not everything. I wouldn't have them like lead a crew, but yeah, it just depends on the person. Of course, we're talking about, we're trying to have a really as high quality of work as possible too. I've also gone out and I've helped just DIYers, and like I had a guy, he's a firefighter out here, and he had us come out and just frame it because he actually broke his leg. And so we went out, we framed his shop for him, and then his leg was pretty well healed up. And then he just asked me, he's like, hey, like I don't want to pay you guys to finish out with all the trim, the sheeting and all that. He's like, but could you come out and show me? And I just went out for a day, showed him how to lay everything out, drill everything, and put everything up, put up the first like 2 sheets with them, showed him some tricks with the trim and all that, and then he just did the rest himself. My most recent hire, he's only been around for about a week now, and he has just some experience doing like steel carports. Like that's it. And he's already doing really, really good. So I think a lot of the learning curve comes from just the type of work itself and not so much from the specific buildings, especially if you have guys that come out and they're just like what I do, even with new hires, if I can, is I have them come out for like a day or 2 before they even agree to doing the job if they don't have construction experience. Because it sucks sometimes. You're out there, it's like negative whatever degrees in your building. So I'll build during the winter, depending on the project too. If concrete's already prepped and depending on what installation they're going for and that kind of thing, I try and build year round. Then in Junction in Mesa County, I build in multiple counties, but in Mesa County, the elevation is a lot lower, so it's a little easier for me to do that here. Not so a little more difficult at higher elevations, but if you're not used to just working in the extreme cold and extreme heat, that can be a problem for some people. Some people like it, some people don't.
How many workers do you have at one job site?
Typically, I found that a 3-man crew that really knows what they're doing can do just about everything. Depending on the size of the project, it could be more useful or it could be less useful to have that many people. Because if you're building like a really small one and it's very simple, like you're just going to kind of have people tripping over themselves unless they've worked together for a while and they're really good about communicating and you have a lead who's really good about planning things out and everyone knows how to interact with each other and they can just kind of work well together. If you're going on a really big project, then you can obviously have more people if you got more room. Theoretically, more people is faster, but it all depends on the actual people themselves and how well they are at the job and if they can self-regulate or if you got a leader on site who can delegate everything properly, because that's a different skill set in and of itself, right? If you got 10 people to manage, you need a good manager for that. If you've got a lead and then like 2 really good helpers, that can be a lot more effective than a 10-man crew that may not be as experienced, may not really know as much of what they're doing without a leader that can really like show them. But I typically do 3-man crew on the bigger ones. I was out today because I've been out a lot on this one just because it's a really windy area for whatever reason. And it's like what is it? It's a 6,600 square foot, like half garage, half house on this farm. And it's really cool. I've actually took some drone footage that, John, I want to send you. I think I'll get some good clips to send you. I'm waiting until it's done because I want to get some clips of like just the framing and then with the roof on. But for that, since we have got EcoFoil insulation, which just blows like crazy in the wind, I like the product, but it just sucks to work with in the wind. So you get the sheets on. And then with the sheeting, and since it is a little bit wider, I think at its widest point, it's 110 feet wide. So when you get up to that peak, those sheets can get pretty tall, and can be a little troublesome in the wind. So I went out there, or I've been out there a lot, and was out there again today, so we could just throw 2 walls on at a time, because you can take 2 people and sheet walls. Me and Braden, who's my like right-hand guy in the field, him and I have sheeted an entire building in a day. It just depends on the building, the complexity, and then who you got, right? I couldn't have done that on that building with a newer guy or with someone else, but him and I can knock it out again.
A question that a lot of people has been asking me is the difference between cold form and tubular buildings. Do you ever build those?
Yeah, I will build with Versatube, but to a very limited degree. Essentially, it's my carports, utility shed. Like when you're looking at your sheds on like Amazon, like I've got one on the side of my house and it's, this tiny 3-foot by 4-foot. It's works. I can throw a couple things in there to keep them out of the rain. It's fine for that. Versatube's a step above that for sure, but I don't know. I just don't trust it as much. I'll only do it on the very small square footage things, and carports again. They're good for that. That's kind of the main usage I see them for. And then if it's just like even like that 40 by 40 we were talking about before, I would not do that in Versatube. I would not do that in Versatube. I would maybe like a 20 by 20, something like that. That's not very tall and that's not at a high elevation. If you're not worried about snow or anything like that. And the other thing you gotta be careful with too is a lot of those different designs, right? For the Versatube, if you don't, and this is one of the big benefits, one of the reasons that I think gives us a really good like selling point as NatMar is we're builders and we'll help you design it. So we know the things about the buildings that someone who only designs them might not know in practicality. So as an example, when you're talking about the Versatube, right? If you're at a higher elevation or just somewhere in general where snow or rain or that kind of thing could be a big problem, a lot of the Versatube structures, it's like, yeah, it seems cheaper sometimes. Sometimes they're actually not material wise, but sometimes they can be. And a lot of times it's because they're kind of skipping out on a lot of the material. Like they don't have, like we've got the purlin, all like the roof framing and everything with cold form, and then as well with the red iron, a lot of the Versatube, it'll just kind of be like hoops, kind of like a I don't know, like a Wild West wagon. That's kind of how they're built, right? So you don't have all that cross support, and you also, yeah, and that matters. Like that matters a lot when it comes to snow loads and just stability in general. So yeah, I think they're good for like really small utility sheds and like carports. I wouldn't put, not that I have one, but if I had like a really expensive car collection or something, I wouldn't put it in a Versatube building. I would stick with the cold form. The gauges of steel can range a lot in cold form, but you get a lot more stability out of it. And even just size wise, the Versatube's a lot more limited just in the size. You may not even be able to build what you want out of Versatube anyway, because like the cold form manufacturer we work with, I believe can clear span 80 feet. And the largest I know of a Versatube company doing is 40. So it's half, right? And then they've got like a limit at 15-foot eve height, where I've done over 20-foot eve heights with cold form. So depending on what you're doing, it may not even work at all. And then I'll just be really careful with what specifically you want to use it for. And then there's other things too. If you're really looking at different types of insulation with like liner insulation for the walls and the roof, that's something you're not going to be able to do with Versatube at all. So you're not going to have that option, period. It's not going to have the support structure in itself to oftentimes even hold like motors. If you wanted motored garage doors, you're gonna have to go with a roll up a lot of the times. You're just a lot more limited with things. Like it has its place, it has its usages for sure. Just like anything does, but I would say it's very small, kind of niche thing. If you want like a real building, then I would do cold form or red iron, but red iron probably isn't necessary. Cold form is going to get to you quicker. You're not going to have all the tapering on the columns and the rafters. You're going to have cheaper foundation. You're going to have less complicated foundation, which is also good because less complexity means less of chances for anyone making mistakes. Yeah, and then it looks better a lot of the times.
So one of the technical challenges I know you face out there a lot, we've talked a little bit about it so far, is wind. And the cold form buildings, they've got a lot of strength, and they're going to withstand a good beating once you've got them completed, once you've got the sheeting on them. So
Yeah.
what advice do you have as far as bracing that building while you've just got the frame up and you're still working to get the frame finished?
I've stood them two different ways, right? What I like to do now is I actually will build out the walls, maybe not entirely, but I get columns, at least one girt line, maybe two, depending on the height, and the eave struts in place, and I'll build all the walls, and then I'll fly in the rafters. I think that works better, particularly on bigger buildings. Or I've also stood them where I have the entire frame line, or I think they're referred to in the plans as portals sometimes, but I call them frame lines, where the rafters and the columns are built all on the ground, and I build them in a stack. And now I've actually custom made brackets that I attach them. So that's a different process of chalk lining that all out and making sure the first one is exactly what you want it to be. And then I build the preceding or succeeding ones. I don't know. I'm bad at grammar. That's not even grammar. That's vocabulary. Anyway, but I build all of the next ones on top of that first one that I know is perfect, and I'll link them up to those brackets, so that way I know everything is exactly how I want it to be. And then I have certain methods that I use to make sure they stay that way. Or even if you need to take them apart, you need to separate the rafters from the columns, you can then piece it back together and know that it's exactly how it is. And there's a certain way you want to do that. I know that's not your question, so I won't go off on too much of a tangent, but just don't rely on just tighten bolts, because those bolts can have a lot of flex, particularly the bigger the building is and how you get it up. There's certain things you want to do to make sure it stays exactly how you want it to be. But to answer your question, what I do is I get these big 27-foot ratchet straps, and then I bolt into usually the sides of the concrete, and then I'll stand my first column, hook it at the top, go in both directions, hook the other end onto those anchor bolts. I just use the anchor bolts that come with the building packages because they're there, and I won't need all of them until later, particularly if you've got end wall columns, and you'll end up shifting them from that point. You'll have to, but that's how I like to start it, because that's the most stable. And when you have the least amount of steel framing, sheeting, all that stuff up in the air, that's when the building is the least stable. So I want my most stable temporary attachment as possible. So I do it that way. And then I kind of I level that. Ratchet straps are great for leveling things. You just got to make sure, particularly again, the higher the building is, the more you got to look out for this, that you're not twisting the column a lot. It's not going to cause any big problems unless you're doing something really wild with it, except making it really frustrating for you to level. But get it as close to perfectly level as you can. It doesn't have to be right on the dot yet. And then I build my wall around that, and those straps stay on until I get to the point where I have to move them, in which case I move them from the side of the, well, actually, so I'll do that on all the walls. And then when I fly in rafters, I do the exact same thing, except I wrap it around the peak, assuming it's a gable style. If it's a single slope or something else, then it's a little bit different, but it's essentially the same kind of thing where you want it supported on the walls and on the roof. So you can have those level, which will help you a lot. I use a laser level off of because I make a big grid when I do my layouts. So that way I can take my laser level and I can shoot it up, say it's a gable style, and I can actually just shoot it and go right off the ground. And that will tell me if my rafters are exactly like in line with my columns all the way across. Particularly, again, the wider the building is, the more important that is, because you don't just want to it's like the guy who taught me originally how to build these. You just kind of stand to one side and kind of eyeball it, and I'm like, that's probably a better way to do this. So I like the laser level for that purpose. But yeah, so you've got essentially 6 straps on a smaller, more simple building, 2 on each sidewall, and then 2 going to the rafters, and that'll get everything leveled and secured. And then skipping farther ahead, and we have all of the framing done, and now it's time to put in base trim. You're going to have to move those straps from the sides. Everything should be stable enough for you to just kind of pop them. I'm a little kind of nitpicky, but I always make sure that I've got 2 people popping them so they can pop one wall all at the same time. So it's not like you have a lot of pressure just cranking it one way or the other, because you're only popping this strap and then it's going to pull that way. So make sure they're both popped at the same time. The building might go give it a little wiggle for a second. It'll be fine, assuming you did your framing properly. And then I shift those over, hook them to the bases of kind of the closest by columns on the inside, where they're not going to be in the way of the base trim and insulation and sheeting installation. So, and then I leave that on until all of the sheeting on that wall is done. And then I can take them off, obviously recheck level at that point, and then recheck level again the day you start sheeting, just in case. Again, nothing should move, but it'll take you 2 minutes, and then you know for sure, right? And then the ones on the roof stay on until all the roof sheeting is done. Yeah, that's why. Or you just leave them all on until the building's entirely done. You can do that too. That's the way I like to do it.
If somebody was looking at cold formed, maybe they're coming from post frame, they're coming from red iron, something like that. What advice would you give them for looking at doing their first building and getting into it?
I would say if you're coming from a red iron, it's going to be relatively similar, right? Just know that there are going to be a couple of those differences of, particularly the layout with the bolts, and then, but some red iron guys too, they'll work with the concrete guys and they'll set the bolts in themselves. So they may already be used to that. Some don't do that. So it just kind of depends on that individual. But yeah, I'd say it's very similar, especially if you already have equipment and you're already geared up to do bigger jobs, then that's all the better. Yeah, if you're a red iron guy and you're looking to get started in cold form, yeah, I mean, I would be all about it. I would offer both to your customer, and then I just what I try and do is I just explain the pros and cons of all the types of metal buildings, and then let them decide, and then I'll build it, and then I just kind of do whatever, and it just happens to be that customers like cold form more. So yeah, but I say go for it. And then if you're coming from a post frame, it'll be a different transition, just because if you're going from wood to metal, it's just a different deal. You can't just go to, I would just say be really good about getting your inventory checks. And then if you're used to doing post frame stuff with still metal sheeting, then, the cuts and all that kind of stuff for openings won't be as big of an issue for you. And of course, you can go into the softwares. And what I like to do personally, just in case, especially if I'm training someone new on doing the cuts for openings, is I like to go in, find the tallest wall sheets, and then just order 2 extra sheets with every building. Because that way, if something does happen, someone does make a mistake, cut a little bit too wide in the wrong direction, you have 2 spares that you can run with. Most of the time we don't end up using them, but every now and then, it's better to have it than delay a project, right? No one wants that, you or the customer. But for the post frame, I'd say go and get good inventory checks, because one thing you're not going to be used to is you're not going to be able to go to Home Depot and go and get girt that same day if you're missing one, or someone cuts something weird for whatever reason or something like that, like you could a 2x4 or 2x6. And then the screws are going to be a lot different for you too than going into wood. That's for sure.
Thank you again to our guest, Nathan Margosian with NatMar Construction. Nathan, we really appreciate you coming on and sharing some of your expertise on erecting cold form buildings.
Again, this is Cold Form Building Made Easy with your hosts, Lauren Toole and John Cosper. Thanks for listening.